It's the Blue Boat Café, a little bit wonkish, a whole lot of fun. I'm David Schellenberg along with Rachel Oyster. We're the co-chairs for Democrats Abroad in Canada's capital region of Ottawa. It's cloudy and overcast and raining. The world is crying today, Rachel.
You're right. It has been, we in Ottawa have had a stretch of really glorious weather, and today the clouds have moved in, the rain's coming down.
Well, and honestly, we need it. Like, I was out fishing with a bunch of friends a couple of weekends ago, and the lake we were on was down 1.5 feet. So
wow.
It's been very dry. I've got some friends out in Nova Scotia. They've had that fire a ban where they can't even go for like a hike in the forests. Because,
they can't even hike.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they might be carrying matches.
Well, exactly. Or a spark might go off or something. So, I mean, he was very frustrated because he specifically, lives in a small town on a golf course for the entire purpose of just being able to take the dog and go for a walk in the forest out behind his house. And he hasn't been able to do that because it's been dry for so long. And that's been a fairly controversial story in that part of the world.
Wow, yeah. I hope they're getting rain today, too. I didn't look.
Yeah, well, and today is the first day of fall, so one of the beautiful...
Good point.
Yes, well, one of the beautiful things about Ottawa is I always say we have the Disney, although Disney's evil today, but Disney is evil at the moment, but we do have the Disney seasons. When fall comes along, the maple leaves and everything else turns these beautiful colors, and we're
gorgeous.
in for this lovely stretch.
Can we call them the Technicolor seasons? Is that more generic? I don't know. It's probably trademarked.
Trademarked. Well, the way things go, Disney will be fine in another year and somebody else will be evil. But, we'll see.
I don't know if they're going to recover, but that's a whole other podcast.
Yeah. All right. Who's with us today, Rachel?
Today we are joined by Benjamin Gorman, who is a publisher at Not a Pipe Publishing and the author of Dear America, A Breakup Letter. Welcome, Benjamin.
Thank you very much for having me, and I have good news for both of you. Disney has caved, and so Disney is no longer the enemy. They just announced they're bringing Jimmy Kimmel back, so we can have Disney seasons again. It didn't last long.
I don't know. Just bringing him back, does that make up for having caved in the first place?
I have a feeling that they have learned a very valuable, and when I say very valuable, I mean they lost $4 billion in 5 days.
Dollars, yes.
So hopefully they will. I don't think they will ever be on the side of the angels, but they will always be on the side of the prophet. And I think they may have just learned something valuable.
But I don't know if they did. A lot of people through all this have been pulling up old South Park episodes where there's a character of Mickey Mouse who shows up representing Disney, and Mickey Mouse kind of kicks a lot of stuff. Like Disney has always played kind of a hardball game.
Oh, yeah. They are, well, and the way that they treat artists in terms of, they're often bad actors. The way that they behave in terms of copyright, they're kind of nightmarish. Yeah, they are, mega corporation to a T. So, yeah, they will never be the good guys. They will always be on the side of money. But I hope Americans have learned something important about the fact that these companies will cave when it comes to money. They care more about their bottom line than they care about appeasing the regime. So that's a good lesson to learn.
And protest works.
Absolutely.
Stand up and...
Well, we got to be careful because, and now we're completely off topic, but that's okay. It's the cafe. But it's the cancer culture, canceling culture. But I remember when everybody was mad at Disney, a year ago, or mad at somebody 2 years ago because of sort of the similar thing, left versus right versus left, and a lot of these times these massive corporations just can't win on anything they do. Somebody will always be mad at them for something.
Absolutely. I think the big difference here is, it is common for us as consumers to use our leverage, whether that's from the right or the left, to say we're not going to support X or Y, and companies can be manipulated in that way. And you're right, it can sometimes be unhealthy, but it is certainly better than the government itself saying thou shalt. And this was a clear case where the FCC reached in as a government entity and said, we will bully you until you appease the potentate. And so this is a good sign that a company is willing to say, this might not make Donald Trump happy, but $4 billion is a lot of money.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
It was, but they caved because of the merger business, right? So we saw this, the Stephen Colbert thing was interesting as well, but a lot of it came down to sort of dare I say, short-term pain for long-term gain in that the whole idea, and here I am defending these companies, but I'm just doing it to make good conversation. But the whole idea for them doing this is because they want to go through mergers. And even if they lost $4 billion in the past couple of days, once the merger goes through, which was the whole reason that they did it, they will make lots of money.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yes. And so and so what it shows is that they they think if they can kind of keep it under the radar, then it's all long-term gain, right? They may make a few people unhappy who don't like this cut that they're making, but in the long run they'll be fine. And I think in this case they were actually worried that there were a lot of celebrities. There were things that were going to be lingering consequences from people recognizing, oh, this was a really bad choice. Because you're right. I mean, they've faced backlash from the right and the left before, and they've weathered it just fine. And Disney is doing okay. In this case, I bet what was happening was
Disney will be fine. Yeah.
Yeah. Disney is not going anywhere. But I think what happened in this case was there were celebs saying, "I won't work with you," those kinds of things, and they were saying, "Oh, this is gonna really have some," they're like you said, it's long-term versus short-term. I think they started to look down the barrel of some real long-term consequences, right. And that's that's. Americans need to recognize protest can't just be something you do on Saturday. Like this, you have to be willing to sustain it because the other side is sustaining it and has been for 50 years, and so we are going. This is a long haul.
Absolutely.
Anywho, let's ask our first question.
Yes, go for it. Oh, do you want me to?
Our traditional first question, Benjamin, is where in the world are you? Why are you there? What keeps you there? And where do you vote?
Yes, so you folks are experiencing some rain, and we are too. I live in Barcelona, Spain, and we've finally had some rainy days, and like you, we've needed it, so that's been really wonderful. So I live in Barcelona, and I vote in the state of Oregon.
And what brought you?
Yes.
Yeah, what brought you to Barcelona?
This is the key point of the whole conversation.
I think this is why we're talking to you today.
What brought me here? So
tell us the story.
I was, it's a long story. I'll give you the very short version. So
it's the internet. We've got time.
Okay.
That's right.
Okay, yeah. So
let's go rich.
I was a high school English teacher in a small town, Independence, Oregon, in a surprisingly purple state. Oregon surprises a lot of folks that it is, often, like its state legislature is exactly 50-50. It is not the blue state that a lot of folks think. And so if you get outside of the major cities, it's pretty red, and so I was in a surprisingly purple town in a purple state because it was a red town kind of on the agricultural side and then had a small university. And so that was kind of the bastion of the blue side. And I was very involved in politics, have been since, for I guess my whole life. I felt like it was really important as a teacher to be standing up for my students. That's something I've always taken very seriously, and I was very involved in my teachers union as well. I firmly believe one of the things we tried to teach teachers as a union is all teachers need to be activists. We are pro-education activists.
Right.
And so I was very engaged in that way. And that was, I would say relatively non-controversial up until a certain point. And then really it was in the summer of George Floyd. I was involved in Black Lives Matter protests and going to a lot of those protests. And people in my community who were seeing, Fox News spin on everything and saying, I believe Portland is on fire. And I would be going to Portland and then posting videos saying, here's where the protest is. And here's behind me, there are people at that cafe. Like, this is not dangerous,
Right.
But I was heavily involved in that. And I started to get on some very scary people's radar. And so, Tucker Carlson, posted a list on one of his shows of teachers who were teaching. I signed a petition saying I will teach history accurately.
Yeah.
And that, he was like, these are the teachers that need to
That's
get
a badge of honor, isn't it? To get
right,
called up
right.
by Tucker Carlson?
Absolutely, right.
Absolutely.
Well, the consequences, we started getting some really scary death threats. And so, some of these folks were really frightening. And this was during, the Biden administration. And so at that time, I still felt like, okay, I can call the police, I can call the FBI. They, investigated these folks. They took care of it, right? And they don't always call you back and say, this is what happened. But like they would get involved and the death threats from that individual would stop. So they were doing something. Mm-hmm. And so I was talking with a friend of mine who worked for the FBI about what that person was going through. I've been trying really hard to protect this person's identity, what that person had been going through. And they said that morale was so low in the FBI. And I said, if Trump wins in the next election, will I be able to call the FBI and expect that they will protect me? And this person said, just point blank, no, you would be calling the Proud Boys for help.
Oh, my God.
Goodness.
And so that was kind of the turning point where my wife and I decided, no way, if Trump wins, we are going to leave. We're going to leave the United States. This is not going to be a safe place to be. Right. And my wife is also a member of the LGBTQIA plus community. Our kid is trans and non-binary. And the kind of funny, not so funny thing about that was when we had decided to leave and we were making all of our preparations, I was saying to my wife, we have time. Like, this is not all going to happen on day one. Like, and my wife said, we need to be out of there by Inauguration Day. Wow. And I thought, okay, that's a little extreme. She was absolutely right. I'm saying this on the air for the record forever. She was right. I was wrong. Because on day one.
Oh, you're not talking politics. You're just talking.
Yeah, this is
marital.
Exactly.
Point scoring.
Worse. Okay.
Right. But the first day that they were in office, one of their day one things was to invalidate any passport that had an X gender marker. Mm-hmm. Right. And so my kid doesn't have a male or female, gender marker on their passport. They're non-binary. Right. Their passport would have been invalidated on the first day of Trump being in office. So we got out by the absolute skin of our teeth. We got out, I think we were a couple of days early. And even that, my wife was like, there could be a problem at the airport. There could be bad weather. Like, we need a couple of days. Like, she was that nervous about it. And boy, was she right. And so we made it in here. And so we watched the inauguration and we watched my kid's passport being invalidated from like the very first hotel. And we were going, oh my gosh, we just got out. Wow. So it was a real close call. And folks who are watching this know when you first move overseas, it is a very stressful experience. And we were not as prepared as we wanted to be. Nobody's ever as prepared as they want to be, but we did all of our escaping between Election Day and Inauguration Day. Amazing. It was incredibly intense. We brought 3 dogs and 2 cats with us.
Wow.
Yeah, it was just wild. So now we're at a place where, we've got a nice apartment. We've managed to find an apartment that we really like. We have jobs. Like, we've settled into a routine, and now we're very, very, very happy with the move. But boy, there were some times there where it was really... We were running away from, very scary people and going, oh my gosh, we don't know if we can make it here. So it's been very stressful.
And you're pulling up parallels in history where people escaped countries ahead of regime changes and does right? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I mean, is come on, like is Trump really that bad?
I am of Jewish descent, and that's something that I'm very cognizant of. Is my ancestors. On my father's side, my great-grandfather and great-grandmother got out, and the ones I'm sure said to them, is this really going to be that bad? Mm-hmm. And they're all gone, right? And so I was, sensitive to, we don't know how bad this is going to get, but we're seeing the signs. Absolutely. And so I was like, this is going to, and we wanted to be in a place also as a publisher. I wanted to make sure I was in a place where I could publish what I needed to publish about the regime and not have to worry about the Jimmy Kimmel, Stephen Colbert effect, right? And so being in a place where we can publish it and nobody can say, no, you cannot do that or you will face the following consequences was a part of the rationale. This was, a tactical retreat to the ground where we can continue to fight.
So how did you choose? Go ahead.
No, just one more. Well, I think you might have been asking the same question. I was going to say, why not Canada?
Right,
Yeah.
right.
How'd you choose Barcelona was mine. So
I know. I had
No,
a feeling Rachel and I were asking the same question.
Canada was certainly one of the countries we considered. So right after the election, before even the inauguration, like I think the day after the election, Trudeau said, hey, people of Canada, don't worry, we're going to put some real strict limits on who can get in from the United States. Right. And I think he was reacting to, how many people on election night were Googling, how do I move to Canada?
And emailing their friends and relatives in Canada. Yeah, do you have room in your basement?
And so we got a real clear impression, okay, Canada would not be an easy place for us to get into if you don't have relatives, and you're well aware of this, the real estate in Canada, specifically we were looking at Vancouver, is very expensive. Yeah, exactly. It's incredibly expensive. And so as, from the Pacific Northwest, as we were looking and saying, okay, we can't afford to live in Vancouver proper, but if we got further and further out, well, if you get further and further out in Canada, you get into essentially Trump country. And we were like, I'm not sure that's an improvement. Yeah, so,
exactly.
That was, I think, part of our thinking. And so then we looked at, you'll get a kick out of this, we looked at the various countries we might be able to get into relatively easily, low cost of living, places that we really wanted to be. And the main ones were here in Europe, Portugal, Spain, Greece, and Italy. And then the main ones in South America were Uruguay and Paraguay. And I speak Spanish. So I thought, okay, makes the most sense to either look at Uruguay, Paraguay, or Spain, because at least one of us will be fluent in the language. That would be a big advantage. And my wife, who, I've already made very clear, was right about the timing.
Once.
Yes, yeah, exactly. She's not great, and she will be the first to admit this. She's not great at geography. So she said, I don't feel like Uruguay and Paraguay are far enough. Oh. I feel like we would be much safer if we were further away in Spain. And, I'm not going to argue somebody's emotions. If it feels safer, great, then it really does feel safer. Nobody can challenge that. But I had to point out on a map, Uruguay and Paraguay are further away. Very, very far away.
Spain's just one ocean. Yeah.
Right. But yeah, so that we moved, of those choices, we decided to move to Spain. And then within Spain, I had visited earlier, but the only other time I'd visited Spain, I'd only come to Barcelona. So I didn't have a basis of comparison, but I knew I loved this city. It is on the UNESCO top 20 list for literary cities. It's a great city for writers. And so as a writer, I was like, okay, well, I guess we'll just move to Barcelona. And I'm still very glad. I love this city. We had a wonderful experience here, but we haven't seen anything else in Spain. Since we moved here, we've been so busy. So I want to get out and see more of the country, because this is a wonderful place. And I haven't even been to Madrid yet, which is just a crime. I haven't been to the Prado in Madrid. I need to go to Madrid.
Well, it's not a big country, man.
It's right. I could rent a car and go check out half of it.
You could walk.
You had minor details like housing and employment to arrange, and pets. Yes, getting your daughter settled.
Exactly. But now she's in school. She could take care of the pets, and my wife and I could go see some cities. So that is absolutely part of our plan.
So just as a side question, how did you connect with Democrats abroad?
So this was cool. When we arrived, I'm trying to think of how we connected with them first. I mean, I know I looked for how we could kind of remain engaged. And I believe it was Rachel, who's one of the people who's the kind of most connected. I'm blanking on her last name, actually, off the top of my head.
Oyster?
No, it probably wasn't me.
No. But she reached out and said, join this Signal or WhatsApp group, and there's going to be a protest. And so we went to the first protest, got involved. They handed us, the flyer with the QR code, and we joined the group immediately. And we were already registered Democrats in the United States. And since then, that's been a great way to connect and meet people. And I would encourage everyone out there, if you move to another country, find the Democrats abroad. It's a great way, not just to be engaged politically as an engaged citizen of the United States, but also it's a great way to meet people and find people who have resources and, tips and tricks. So yeah, join your Democrats abroad. It was very good for us.
Absolutely. So tell us more about your publishing company. What was it that was drawing such negative attention? Right.
So we started in 2013, and our focus initially was publishing underrepresented voices in genres where there's a lot of lack of representation. So women in science fiction and fantasy, especially. There's not enough women being published in science fiction and fantasy. Then we kind of broadened out, and so we are publishing a lot of LGBTQIA plus folks in genres like mystery and thriller and that kind of thing. So kind of being a place where people could come and it's a very traditional publishing house in terms of its structure, and get published and get their voices out there. The books themselves were fiction. At first it was exclusively fiction. Now, since then, we have done poetry, and we've just done our, the Dear America breakup letters, our first nonfiction book.
Nonfiction, right.
But, before, you wouldn't think this would be particularly controversial. And we got a wild amount of blowback for being woke, for really making a public, making a public
not the cancel culture.
Exactly.
You working for Disney?
So people would say, "Oh my gosh, you're going out of your way to publish underrepresented voices." And it wasn't that we were not publishing white men. We published some of my books, but we published disproportionately more women, more people of color, and that offended some folks. And so that also got us on the radar. And there's this interesting tension, because you will hear people say, "Oh, it would be great to get attention for being, banned." None of our books were ever officially banned by anyone. But that controversy would somehow be good. And one of the things that I've learned in this industry is that is an attitude that is kind of carried forward and perpetuated by cishet white men, who think, "Oh, this will be fine because we've never really faced the consequences of that harassment." And the harassment, the banning, the censorship is not worth it. It is not beneficial to court controversy in that way. It's the way authors are treated, especially women, especially people of color, is really terrible and genuinely frightening. And so, starting a company where we could do right by our authors and try and protect them and be in their corner was really important.
Right. All right. I'll go here for the sake of the conversation. I'm a white guy. I hate to admit it. But one of the things that we see with the Democrats and versus the Republicans, and a bunch of news going on in the middle, which Jimmy Kimmel's in the middle of, won't touch there. I know a lot of white guys, younger, a lot of them straight, who have never done anything wrong in their entire life, and do feel at the moment like they can't figure out why the world is so mad at them.
I think that is a wonderful learning opportunity. And I hope that those young white men will, rather than being hardened and being angry about that, will say, "Oh, this isn't about me. This is about systems. This is about structures." And rather than being, allowing somebody to kind of manipulate me into some of these far right groups on this false notion that I am being threatened or harmed in some way.
Right.
This is a real opportunity for me to learn about the people around me who face a lot worse. Right. It is, as much as it might be uncomfortable to have somebody go, "Oh, you're a cishet white man, and I am judging you in that way, but based on the fact that you are a cishet white man." And boy, we joke a lot about the last thing the world needs to hear more of is cishet white guys. But I recognize there are young white men who are going, "I hear that joke and I feel very threatened."
Right.
And understand, take the time to learn. This is a wonderful chance to learn, no matter how many times you hear that joke, the racism and sexism that other people face is going to be a lot worse. Because these things are structural.
Yeah, but the problem is we've already told them that you're in trouble or you're devalued because you're a white guy. So do you feel, at least in my world, when I see a lot of these guys, I feel like we've already lost them. We're not getting them back because we went too far already.
I don't know that it's that we went too far. I think the very notion of power sharing was something that there were people who were ready to exploit that.
Right.
And so as soon as we said, hey, this is going to be, equality is important and equity is more complex even than equality. What do we need to give people so that they have the opportunities they need? There were people who were chomping at the bit to say they are going to take from you. Right. And so, you're absolutely right. There were people who, fell for that and were totally lost, where they went, oh, no, this is everyone is against the cishet white, Christian men.
Yeah.
They were not ready. They didn't have the kind of wherewithal to understand.
Exactly.
All the structural incentives still are to your benefit, right? None of that has magically changed. Nobody's shooting you in the back because of the color of your skin, right? But they'd heard the message from the kind of con artist folks who were saying this is an opportunity to gain a lot of power. And so, we certainly need to have some thoughtful systemic outreach to those folks to say, I think one of the important things to say, and this isn't just for cishet white men, it's for all of MAGA, is to say, you are not irredeemable. We are not the ones calling you evil or vermin or the enemy. Like, you come back into the fold. You can re-enter society and not be hateful. This is not the end for you, And I think that it's hard when you're hearing the rhetoric of your own side to not project that on the other side and say, oh, okay, if we sit around saying the other people are the enemy and they're evil and they're vermin and they're animals, I'm sure they think the same about us. We don't.
Yeah, but they're also saying they are saying it about you, right? They're not listening to us; they're listening to them. And
exactly. Yeah.
Well, so I don't know. I think both sides call the other side vermin a lot.
It does happen on both sides, but they're also hearing. I don't know. I don't think it's an interesting question. If we're saying the right is saying the left is calling you evil is the left saying the right is calling you evil. I don't think so.
Yeah. Well, and it's absolutely there are going to be voices, right? Sure, there are
always.
Absolutely people on the left, but it's very different when it is your leaders, right? And so you do not hear people who are in charge.
It's very different when it's an outright lie.
Right, right. And so, there are extremist voices, certainly, but you don't hear Democratic politicians, kind of prominent Democratic thinkers saying everybody on the right is subhuman, whereas you are now hearing Stephen Miller and Donald Trump, even saying these people are animals. Well, and if everybody is, if a left-wing voice says that, I'm not voting for that voice, right?
Exactly.
But if a right-wing voice says that and then half of the American public either votes for it or says, I'm going to sit on my couch because I'm comfortable enough if that person wins, then that is really telling that there's an appetite for that kind of hatred. And those folks then are more susceptible to say, I'm sure both sides. I'm sure the other side is saying that about me too. No, we're not. We really aren't.
Right.
You're saying there's good people on both sides? No. Wait,
I am not saying that. Yeah, I'm saying one side is choosing leadership who is saying something very, very different. And so even the both sides kind of defense falls apart, right? This is not who we vote for.
Right, exactly. So the negative attention you got, was that, you did mention Tucker Carlson, but did it start locally and then go national? Did it come from national sources first? How did that...
that's a good question.
How far and how fast did it spread? Yeah.
And of course, we'll never know exactly how it moved, but my suspicion is that it was local to national. And so the folks who were, in my own community were calling my school district and saying, you should fire this guy. Sometimes they would include me in these emails. I've seen some of them and they're wild. 6-page long email to the superintendent saying, one of the ones that was amusing, although in the conglomeration of all of this, there was a lot of stuff that makes this scary. But one of the things that was very funny, the person's rationale was that my wife was wearing, in one of the pictures of us standing with our Black Lives Matter signs, she was wearing earrings that are guillotines. And this person went on this long tirade about how because she was wearing guillotine earrings, And because in the French Revolution they ended up shooting people rather than guillotining them, therefore, by me standing next to her, I was in favor of school shootings. Like, that was the train of thought.
God.
And therefore, she ought to fire me because I was supporting school shootings it was
by standing next to your partner who's
by standing,
guillotining.
exactly, right? I mean, so some of this stuff was really, really wacky, but some of it was genuinely, there was somebody who told us in the email, in the messages, I'm a truck driver. I drive through your town. I know where your wife drives to work. Wouldn't it be a shame if somebody ran her off the road? I know where your kid goes to school. Wouldn't it be a shame if a truck ran him over on the way to school? So, I mean, there was scary stuff in this. And, that one at the time I could call the police and that person went away, right? So whatever the FBI did after that call, they addressed it. They might have just called him and said, we know who you are, knock it off, right? But to know that was something they would address, and to know now, they've got Tom Hammond on videotape taking $50,000 in cash for a bribe and are going, we're going to let that slide because the administration has decided that's okay. It's a very different organization in just a few short months.
A matter of months, yes.
Yeah.
Well, how much credibility, here's none of these awkward questions, do you give to these keyboard warriors who just kind of sit there and spew crap?
Well, and that's the $64,000 question, right? I mean, when you are dealing with these folks, some large percentage are never going to do anything, right? No. They're just sitting there trying to frighten you. They're just trying to,
well, you're also the 50th message they've written that hour.
Right. And so you have no idea. And also, some very small percentage of them are crazy and will act. And we have seen that, so.
That's the Charlie Kirk thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, the going suspicion now, and we know this is theory, is that was a different right-wing group. It was Nick Fuentes' Grapers where Nick Fuentes, as, a stochastic terrorist, gets on his podcast and says somebody ought to go after Charlie Kirk, knowing some very small percentage of his radio following are crazy. Right. And, and then this one guy, so it was, right-wing on right-wing violence.
The lone wolf is
right, but you just have to activate the lone wolf. And so knowing that and getting all of these, I could sit around my house knowing, okay, I'm probably fine. And also, there could be one kook out there who decides to act on this.
Right.
And I can't. I will then deal with the stress all the time. Yeah, like I'll be worried all the time living in this country. Whereas here, one of the things we've noticed is my wife was walking down La Rambla, the very famous street here in Barcelona, and a car backfired, and she was the only one who ducked because nobody worries. Nobody worries about a loud banging noise because no one here has guns. It's just a totally different attitude about political violence. We have these giant rallies for Gaza that have been going on, for Palestine that have been going on regularly, and the police are not involved in any way. Whereas when, we were, even at the best times, when we were rallying for Black Lives Matter, the police were out and we were watching them and they were watching us. And sometimes we felt like, these police are protecting us. And often we felt like these police are, are not at all here to protect us.
Yeah.
But we never felt like, a protest doesn't need the police because this country is just safe. And so that's been really telling you have to get far enough away from America to realize, from the United States, to realize we didn't feel safe all the time. We carried around this constant stress of the threat of violence that many people in the world just don't have to deal with on a day-to-day basis.
So was the sound of gunshots something that you were accustomed to in Oregon?
Yeah, I was wondering the same thing. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, so, living in rural Oregon, it's hunting culture. It's, guns are everywhere. They're ubiquitous. And you got the open carry folks. But I can tell you, the scariest protest I went to was not in Portland, was not in Salem, and some of the ones in Salem got a little scary. But one of the ones, the scariest one was in a small town. I won't even say the name. It was a small town, and we got a lot of blowback at this one. And the folks who came out, they had their own megaphones. They were screaming the N-word. Like, it was really scary.
Wow.
And and they were carrying AR-15s. And when a person who's, strapped with an AR-15 is using a megaphone to shout the N-word at you, it's really scary that this could go real south real fast.
Right.
You just don't have that in most parts of the world where the people, that's not normal.
No, and I lived in Boston and before that Baltimore, and in neither place were guns ubiquitous or even visible, at least when I was living there. Things may have changed, but
yeah, but I also think careful with most parts of the world. Like, the world's a pretty crazy place.
Yeah, I mean, there are certainly places that are very dangerous. I should say, in kind of the first world. Like, this is just not something that, wealthy developed countries deal with, or wealthy developed countries have dealt with this. Australia certainly dealt with this and dealt with it effectively, and just said, we're not going to be a culture like that anymore. So we know it's possible.
Yes.
And yet, there are a lot of guns per capita in Canada. But there's not the same culture of violence.
There's good gun control, yeah.
Yeah. And so it is, this is a choice, and this is one of those things we kept coming back to in our distance and realizing, this is a choice that the American people have made. This is something democratically that has not been pushed, right? And recognizing, our extreme income inequality is a consequence of a choice of the American people. Not having socialized medicine is a consequence of a choice. Like, we chose that terrible healthcare system.
No, when we talk to people living outside the U.S. about what they've learned in their country of residence, that, the best practices, and those are the first things that come up: gun control, universal health care. There are others, obviously, but those are usually the first two on people's lists.
And I think that's one of the wonderful things about Democrats Abroad, and that's what I've been encouraging our local chapter to be engaged in that way, is the Democrats Abroad can be the organization that informs the rest of the Democratic Party. Hey, this is a viable issue for you.
Exactly.
Like, don't be afraid to be the party that is pro, universal health care. Because let me tell you, when people get away and experience it, they would never go back.
Right. But I think there's something I know when I try to explain to Canadians how in Canadian politics, how far to the right even the Democrats are compared to Canadian politics. Like Kamala Harris says, she's a gun owner.
Right.
I don't know of any leader of any Canadian party, respectable party, on the right or the left, who ever stood up and said, I am a gun owner.
Well, and felt obligated to say it.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right.
Say,
I'm sure there were politicians who are like, here's me out hunting, but they're not, saying I have to push this idea as part of my bona fides, And same thing with, the fear about universal health care. They're afraid to say they're for universal health care. Why? Why is that so scary? Because they're afraid of sounding extreme. Because you're right, the Democratic Party is a center-right party compared to most of the world.
Yeah.
Most of the developed world.
No. So tell us about your book, Dear America, a breakup letter.
So this was an experience within an experience. So, part of my, as an author, I've always been a novelist and a poet. And so nonfiction is something that I avoided because I felt like, who cares what I think? I don't have, I'm a storyteller. I don't have, particular kind of life story that lends itself to, here's my expertise.
You're a white guy. Yeah, we got
I'm just a cishet white guy, right? Exactly. And a high school English teacher from a small town, right? Like, this is not, I'm not, living some fancy lifestyle or anything. And
you're a poor white guy.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Poor you.
Poor me. No, I was a public school teacher, solidly middle class, like completely nondescript, not noticeable in any way. And so then we found ourselves in this situation, and I processed in the way that I process. Like, okay, this is wild what is happening. I need to write about this. And so I decided the way to, and one of the things I tell my creative writing students is, you really want to make sure you've got the audience in mind, right? Is this beneficial for anyone? Yeah. Or if not, it's a diary, and that's fine. Keep a diary. That's an excellent practice for your mental health. But I decided, no, if I'm writing a book, how am I going to frame it so that it's at least as maximally, I don't know if entertaining is the right word, but engaging. The story was kind of dire.
Maximally?
Right. Yes, and so I designed it like a breakup letter. Like I was saying, dear John, this is why this relationship's not going to work. Only it was written to the United States, as though the United States were this personified character. And I'm saying, hey, I don't know. Is it me? Is it you? Clearly, this relationship isn't working, and I've got to get out of this. And so hopefully that makes it. Again, I'm not sure entertaining is the right word. You wouldn't, but there's a kind of voyeurism aspect of reading somebody else's breakup letter. Like,
yeah, there is. Yeah.
And so I wrote this and I didn't know if this would be a book. When I started to write it, I thought, okay, this is going to be something I'll post on Facebook. It'll be that short. Well, I even thought, at first, I thought this is going to be the post explaining why I'm leaving. And then, okay, now I'm going to have to post this to my blog because this is too long for Facebook. Okay, no, it's 60 pages. Okay, no, it's 120 pages. It's a short book, but it's way too long for anybody to read on their, on my blog. So they became this book, and then as it developed, the question was, do we publish it while we're still in the United States? And we decided let's wait until, and so it went to press right after we arrived here. Like, okay, now we're safe. Actually, in fact, I believe we were in Canada when it was, we were in process. We were moving through, somewhere between Vancouver and Montreal when it officially.
You get to Barcelona via Canada? Okay.
Yes. Oh, well, that's a story too. So we found that all the American U.S. airlines, including American and U.S. airlines, wouldn't let us bring pets. And the only airline that would allow us to bring our pets was Air Canada. And living in the Pacific Northwest, no problem. Air Canada serves Portland. Yep. And so we had to fly from Portland to Vancouver, then Vancouver to Montreal, Montreal to Barcelona. Only the little puddle jumper from Portland to Vancouver was too small for 3 pets. We were only allowed 2. Three dogs. We'd take 3 dogs.
Cats, yes.
And so my wife ended up flying 12 hours before my daughter and I did with one of the dogs. Then the 2 of us hopped on a plane and caught up with her. So she sat in the Vancouver airport for 12 hours with our 90-pound dog waiting for us. And then we caught up and all traveled together. So that day was it was just nuts. We were just exhausted and so stressed. And then the relief of arriving, you just feel like, we made it. Yeah. It was a wild experience, and I'm very glad we did it now. But boy, at the time, it was really challenging. Yeah. Moving is not easy, folks.
No.
Even under the best of circumstances.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah. So we had a lot of feelings that day, but I'm very glad we made the move.
Wow. And you were a teacher, and you mentioned being in the union. Mm-hmm. And I gather there's a story about the Oregon teachers' strike.
Yes. So folks who don't know, this is one of those things you're often not taught in school. But, I encourage you, do some research on why is it that countries around the world have these nationwide strikes and we never have them in the United States. Mm-hmm. And the reason is it's illegal. And the question of why it's illegal to have a nationwide strike is one that I think a lot of Americans really ought to explore because it's really telling, right? They have said we do not want workers to be able to shut this country down. That's really scary to the powers that be. So there's lots of laws that prevent that. And in Oregon, we found ourselves in a circumstance where we were saying, what is it that our union is going to do? Because our funding, the funding model had been kind of broken by some anti-tax activists who had made it so that the state was taking in less and less and less money every year and just couldn't pass any kind of legislation. They had designed it so that you needed a supermajority, and there was no supermajority available to pass it, put a piece of legislation forward to the voters. And so we worked for, I kid you not, 10 years. And I was on the very first committee that proposed this to the state union. And then I was on that, they said, that's great that you proposed this. Yes, we agree. This should be something we should work on. You're on it. Volunteered myself.
That's like Democrats abroad.
Exactly.
Like any volunteer organization. Great idea. Can you lead it?
So I ended up, and I often was not the leader. I was worked with a wonderful group of people, but we worked for a decade to try and get our union to, really get into some of these school districts in, rural areas and say, would you be a part of this? And there was a lot of pushback. There was a lot of hesitation because everybody taking a day off is an illegal wildcat strike.
Wow.
And so we had to convince all of these folks, and we were very transparent with parents, with, school districts. A lot of school boards and superintendents ended up being on our side and marching with us. They knew that, the model was not viable. So that was cool. It wasn't, the normal workers against management. This was everybody who cared about education saying to the state, you need to get your act together. And we ended up taking just a single day where we said, hey, community, the reason your kid is not in school is because all the teachers are headed off to Salem to do this giant march. Wow. And they had marches in a lot of localities that were too far from the state capitol, but we had a huge march at the state capitol, and a bunch of the national National Education Association leadership came out because this was a really big deal for them too, kind of setting the tone and saying, hey, educators, you can do this. And this action was so big that the state then passed, and I should double check this because I don't want to get this number wrong because by an order of magnitude, I believe it was $2 billion more for education funding. Wow. It was either 200 million or 2 billion, but I believe it was
that's a big difference.
Billion. Right? It's an order of magnitude.
Either way, it's a lot of money.
It was a lot of money, and already they've walked that back and hidden some of it, and so the fight continues. You cannot do this in a day, and it doesn't end when you pass one piece of legislation. But it was a huge win for the state, and it was a real eye opener for the union too. That once you get people organized and active, they stay active, and I think the Democratic Party is going to find this too. If you get a whole bunch of people engaged in a No Kings rally.
Yes.
The benefit of the No Kings rally is not just on that day, it's on election day. Because those people now have that experience where they're saying, I was engaged, I guess we stand for this now. It's become part of my identity. Exactly. And so I'm really hopeful that some of the folks who are watching their neighbors be kidnapped by ICE are going to go, never again. I'm never going to support this. I'm going to be a Democrat for life now. So we shall see how the party capitalizes on this.
Yeah, let's hope.
Yeah, I agree. Let's hope. I mean, and that's
right.
Sort of a lot of what we're reading for the Democrats is who's the next presidential candidate going to be? Like, there's a lot to see. Any bets?
No. I certainly have hopes. I don't know if I'm getting out over my skis by saying so, but I hope the Democrats will not play it safe. This is a real dangerous time for them. If they say, we are so nervous, we are so scared, we need to have Gavin Newsom because he's palatable, and very centrist, they will continue to bleed their left flank, thinking they're going to pick up a few Republican votes. And we know this has been one of the things that has been most frustrating to me is watching Democrats try to avoid, Republican criticisms and say, oh, I better not say this or they're going to call me a socialist. Yeah. They're going to call you a socialist anyway. It doesn't matter what you do, so do what's right. So I've been really pleased with people like, Mamdani in New York, who could not run for president, unfortunately, but the, folks who are the kind of next generation, your AOCs, people who are saying, they're going to hate us no matter what. Right. They're going to call Biden an extreme leftist when the guy was down the middle at every turn, right? Yeah. So if you're going to be, caricatured as being the extreme left, then do something with that. Well, but also take some positions that you believe in strongly.
But also don't take the bait.
Right. One of the things I would love to hear, and that has been a frustration of mine, is the Democrats are so cowed by this charge of being the party for open borders that they try and take this kind of halfway position, and where they say, oh no, we're also against undocumented people, just to a lesser degree. And I would love it if we had some Democrats who were brave enough to say, you know what, immigration is really, really good for the United States. We absolutely need more people. I would support a radical expansion of immigration. And there's great economic data on this.
Yes.
What's Iglesias' last name? I'm blanking on
Julio.
the guys. It's not Julio Iglesias.
That's what popped
I'm
into my
blanking on the
head,
author's
too.
name, but he wrote a book called A Billion More Americans. And he makes a case that you could scale up the United States economy. We've got the room. We've got the, to a billion people. If a billion people from the, kind of developing world wanted to move to the United States, not only could the United States accommodate a billion more people, it would thrive.
Yeah.
And you just don't find people brave enough to say, hey, you don't have to go out there and say we should take on a billion more people, but you do need to say, immigration is good. We should have more people coming in instead of saying, I promise we'll be Republicans light.
Right.
Like what,
Because much of the world is much more crowded than North America is.
Right. There's plenty of space. Yeah, there are very few people who live in Wyoming. And it's a beautiful state. Go live in Wyoming.
I've been there, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you can say the same thing about Canada. We're basically the same population as California, spread over a area much greater than the U.S. So.
There's a lot of room, and you could take in a lot of. And with global climate change, we need to acknowledge one of the things that's going to be hard for folks in Canada and the United States to admit to ourselves is a lot of the people who are leaving their home countries are leaving because of us. We made we're making Ecuador uninhabitable, because it's just going to be literally too hot to live there. So,
but we're helping the Canadian wine industry. Grapes are growing much better in Canada than they ever have before.
So reach out to the people in Ecuador and say, hey, we need somebody to work these vineyards and own these vineyards.
And own them, yes, that's right.
Right?
Yeah.
I think that would be wonderful.
Yep.
Well, but even think about immigration. And one of the things I do hate to say is Trump is right, but he's doing it the wrong way. So when you talk about immigrating to Canada, Canada has this ridiculously complicated point system for immigrants to come into this country. The honest thing is the United States is pretty generous on the way that they allow immigrants.
Well, this is interesting. So I have a friend from the United States immigration system is very generous to some people.
Yes.
So the United States immigration system is an absolute mess, and it's
But who's doing it right?
So, well, there are countries that have very, very straightforward rules. So that's an example would be like Paraguay or Uruguay in South America, where they say, if you have the following amount of money in the bank, you can move here.
That's the Canadian system too,
right? And it's but Paraguay and Uruguay, the amount of money is very different than Canada. It's like
$30.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, like if you've got $5,000 in a bank here, move here and start to make a life, and if you can be successful and make a life, then that will benefit us. Okay. And if you can't, you'll leave, right? And that's a very different way of thinking about immigration is if somebody wants to come, they want to come and make their life better. And they're going to make their community better in that way. Whereas a friend of mine came from Mexico to the United States, and in the United States, when you want to kind of go through the system, there are all these... they're not hidden fees per se. You can find out about them, but it cost him over $100,000 because we make sure that when somebody wants to kind of go through the immigration process, that American taxpayers aren't footing any of the bill. So the judge in that immigration case, the bailiff, the lawyers, everybody who's involved in bringing that person in is being paid by the immigrant.
Wow.
And so it's incredibly expensive and arduous. It takes years to go through that process. Well, as a person is going through that process, they are undocumented for a period of time because they, often will overstay their visa, their tourist visa or student visa because the process takes so long. Right. And then they enter into this limbo where they're very easy to exploit, where somebody can say, I'm going to call, this immigration on you if you don't work for, minimum wage and not complain about it or less than minimum wage.
And so you're saying that not a new phenomenon either.
No. This has been going on, the system has been broken for decades.
Yes.
And what Trump is exploiting, and we are seeing this in Europe a lot as well, is there are folks who are saying, hey, are you frustrated about X, Y, and Z? Those things are the consequences of immigrants. And they're tangentially related. And so it deceives people. So, for example, here, there's a real housing crisis. This is legitimate. The rent is too damn high, right? That's a real thing. But when you actually kind of break down the numbers, the rent is not too high because of immigration. That's like 5% of it, right? The rent is too high because the building has not kept pace with demand because of the global economic collapse in 2008.
Exactly.
Builders just went, we're not going to get caught with our pants down again. Let's just not build enough homes. And so, it is correct. Nobody can fact check these folks and say, you're a liar. Immigration is not at all related. It's related. You've just got to have the nuance to say it's 5% of the problem. And if we ended immigration tomorrow, it wouldn't solve the problem. But it's easier to blame immigrants. But the other thing that I want to be honest about with even myself is we're inconvenient. We really are. As I'm wandering around the city, learning my way around, I'm getting in people's way. As I am, navigating the bureaucracy, and my Spanish is not as good as a native speaker's, I'm slowing down the kind of gears of the machinery. And so, if you're on the far right, you can take that energy that was mild annoyance. Why is this person with bad Spanish standing in front of me in line, and turn it into outrage, right? And then say, if we just got rid of all the immigrants, your life would be better. Well, it might have slightly fewer annoyances, but your country would also be poorer.
Right.
Immigrants make your life mud.
Your food would be horrible.
Right. Well, and those very same folks go home and hop on Google. Google, which is run by immigrants and was essentially invented by immigrants. But we don't see so many of the aspects of our lives that are the product of immigration that are positive. We see the negative, right? And we're like, oh, this. And so these folks are absolutely capitalizing. And what I wish people realized is the people who are trying to capitalize on that are not doing it because they want to make your life better. Fascists never want to improve lives. If they're trying to say, please vote for me because you're angry and scared and furious, they have no incentive to make you anything other than angry, scared, and furious, right? That worked for them. And so they're not, and this is borne out by history. Fascists don't make your life better. They make you more miserable because they needed your misery to get you to vote for them in the first place, which is why somebody like Donald Trump starts out with his first inaugural by talking about American carnage. No president had ever given a speech where they started off saying everything is terrible. He always talks about everything is terrible because he needs his people to feel like everything is terrible, which is this really weird mix of, they'll say we're the greatest and also we're awful. And, that's... Yeah, and that's why. And so, I think that anti-immigrant sentiment is always rooted in something real, but it's something that is so small compared to the benefits of immigration, but I can see why it tricks people.
And it's easy to exploit the anger. It's very hard to communicate the nuance, which is all you have to counter it with.
Exactly. We end up sounding like boring old professors.
Exactly.
Right? You sound like Barack Obama saying on the one hand. On the one, Obama was famous for, being criticized for saying, well, on the one hand, and on the other hand, right? Because he was giving complex answers, and his own people were saying to him, stop doing that. Just, speak in sound bites. And he was like,
the world is full of nuance. Yeah, it is.
He was a law professor. He can't do anything but talk like a professor,
Exactly. Oh, Benjamin, this has been such a pleasure. Is there anything else that you want to make sure we touch on before we wrap up?
I just want to thank you for doing the work you're doing. I think that spreading the word about Democrats abroad, especially as we go into this next election, folks internationally, please vote if you can and fight for your right to vote, because it's going to really matter.
It does matter. Thank you. If you live outside the U.S., please register with your voting state at votefromabroad.org every year. Do it now. To find all our episodes, go to democratsabroad.org and look for us in the drop-down menu. I'm Rachel Oigster with David Schellenberg in Ottawa, Canada. Thank you for listening to Democrats Abroad, the Blue Vote Café.